So first and foremost, please understand that site conditions for 2900 vary dramatically on each product or each project, and the solutions for each project may require some planning and careful planning. Know that everybody here at Insolroll is here. We're here to help you. From customer service and sales, all of us are here to help kind of guide you and answer questions. You're not in this alone. We're here to help you out. What I'm going to do is go through kind of an overview of what 2900 is, give you some more information on 2900, what they are, what their purpose is of the product, go through some detailing and measuring information on the product itself, how to measure, what things to look for. Then we're going to go through the actual installation guidelines that are actually the install guidelines that are sent out with every 2900, and go through those and kind of help go through how the installation goes together, some tips, some tricks, some things to make it easier. And then we're going to go through the troubleshooting, some things that pop up that we hear on a semi-regular basis, or things that pop up that we've heard of, and some of the fixes and things that help you out to either eliminate service calls or minimize them if we can. So Oasis 2900, I'm going to dive into some of the key points, was designed and is designed for patio, door, garage, window applications where insect mitigation or small or slight amounts of weather can be an issue. It's great for large patio and window applications, decks, patios, pergolas, areas that require some kind of protection, insect, heat, glare, golf ball, even nosy neighbors. I have 4 2900s on the back of my house. I have wonderful neighbors to the south of me, although they don't want to have dinner with me sometimes, and I don't want to have dinner with them. So we use the product sometimes just to give us a barrier so that we're not intruding on each other's space. 2900s will do custom sizes up to 19 feet wide. You have a couple of choices of motorization with the Oasis 2900 product. One would be Somfy motors, or we do a driven by Lutron system, which uses a EDU, electronic drive unit, from Lutron. It is a zipper retention system, which means it creates a 4-sided seal that will keep bugs out. It does have weather stripping at the head box, and it does have a seal at the bottom bar to keep insects, the creepy crawlies, from coming in. So it does provide a full enclosure scenario. So one of the things that I'm going to stress over and over as we go through this is making sure you set the right expectation with your customer, your end user. And by that, I mean, with 2900 retractable insect screen applications, you really need to understand that typically they're used during nice weather or when the end user wants to spend some time outdoors. These shades are really not designed to be windscreens. They should not be lowered or retracted during high wind events. So I'm here in Colorado. I live semi-close to the Front Range. We get winds that come through our neighborhood anywhere from 40 to 70 miles an hour periodically. It's best to have those shades retracted in those type of events. Also, it is not a set it and forget it product. It's not a product that you're going to want to put down, leave for the weekend, and then come back, a week or 2 or 3 or 6 weeks later, because you can end up with some problems if you're looking for a product to do that. The Oasis products don't fit that bill. Understand that 26, 27, and 2800, those shades are really designed for sunscreen applications. They should not be left down in strong winds. Those products should be retracted. I tell folks, and have for years, it's a use it when you're out there, put it up when you're not. Those shades, if they're left down in high wind situations, are subject to abuse, and it is not covered under the warranty. So just understand some of those things with exterior product. all of the exterior product, please understand that when freezing temperatures and extreme heat can cause products to react in different ways. So end users may want to operate exterior shades year round. It's fine to do that in most applications. However, if you're doing product for window applications, it's not recommended to sell them as a primary window application. And we'll cover this a couple of times, you get too cold with the exterior product, it may or may not operate properly. And all motors that we use have a thermal override. So consistently using them in temperatures, warmer climates, and you're using it regularly up and down consistently, it may hit its thermal override and stop. So just understand that there are some applications. If you're in some of those northern, I saw on here, Kansas, Indiana, and Missouri. I'm an Iowa kid originally. We get cold, freezing winters. You put a product in and expect it to work on a window when it's minus 15 or 18 degrees, may or may not work. You may get stuck with a shade that goes down and doesn't come back up. So just understand that there are some limitations to that. Also, for exterior window applications, we recommend limiting the size of that window application to approximately 100 square feet. And the reason being is large exterior window applications seem to have or can have more problems, especially when it's used as a secondary window treatment. So, there may be days when it's too windy to put it down, or the weather's too inclement to put that shade down. So just understand and set the right expectation with your customer or client. Again, with the motor considerations, Somfy motors tend to operate fairly well down to about freezing. Anything below that, you could have some issues. Lutron EDUs work fairly well down to about, Somfy motors work down to about 0. Lutron drives work fairly well down to about freezing. So understand when you get below freezing, you may have issues or concern. There may be some concerns with that motor operating properly or operating at all. Also, with that thermal override, understand if you're in areas, I saw California, and I lived in Arizona for some time. If it's 115 degrees out and you've got somebody running a shade up and down multiple times, it may hit its thermal override fairly quickly, and it may take quite some time for it to cool back down before it operates again. Doesn't hurt the motor, doesn't hurt the operation of the shade, just understand that it may hit its thermal override. I have a 4.5-year-old at my house. She has run shades up and down multiple times, and she has hit thermal override. So just understand and bring those things up with your customer or client. So 2900 detailing what it is and how it works. So the 2900 is a uses a Shy-Zip fabric guide system. A complete shade will come with a 5 by 5.5 inch extruded aluminum head box. You're going to have a side track that has a Shy-Zip insert in it, a weighted aluminum hem bar with that flex seal at the bottom. It's a 1-inch flexible seal. And then obviously the fabric, depending on what you choose. That side retention system, or Shy-Zip, the way that it works, you have an aluminum side track. In that side track is a Shy-Zip zipper system. That zipper system has a slot that the zipper comes down in. That zipper is actually half of a zipper that's been heat welded to the outside leading edge of the fabric. When it comes down in that Shy-Zip insert, that insert does not allow that fabric to be pulled back out. And the reason it works that way is because the zipper is actually thicker than the fabric. So there's a slot that the fabric can pass up and down in, but the zipper sits in the void behind it, so it cannot come out. That keeps insects from coming in and around. It also retains that fabric on both sides, so it holds it taut. Not really taut, but it holds it so that if it's pushed on it or you get a breeze pushing on it, it's not going to pop out of the zipper. These two cutaways show you the side track as well as the side track and head box. On the upper left-hand side, it shows the pile or the top seal that is on the back of the head box. This is on all exterior 2900s. We have a couple of different options for head box. It's on both of them. That felt pile is really designed to keep insects from coming up and over the back of the shade and into the space that you're trying to keep the insects out of. That pile is not designed to clean the shade as it goes up and down. It does have a little bit of that effect, but that's not what it's designed for. The bottom hem bar is weighted. Depending on the size of the shade, we do and may add some weights on the inside of it. They are stainless steel. And then there is a 1-inch hem bar seal strip at the bottom. It is a flexible gasket, similar to what you find on a garage door. And it does come down. It'll close a void of about 3/4 of an inch. So it's really designed to come down and sit on the bottom sill. You'll also notice on that same picture, hem bar hangs into the side tracks 3 3/4 inches when retracted. We're going to touch on this multiple times, and there's the reason for that is it keeps the fabric retained in that Shi-Zip insert. So you've got two choices on the way you mount side tracks. You can side mount them. We do supply the screw that you see there. It is color coded. It's a pan head screw, and it is color coded to match the side track. You can also face mount them. If you face mount them, you'll get a plug button that comes very close to matching the side track color. So you have 3 types of roller enclosures to choose from. A standard shade priced out of the book or straight out of the system is going to come with a 5 by 5.5 inch extruded aluminum head box. That is the standard. It's actually what we consider a 5-sided box because it does have 5 sides. And then you also have a choice of a 5 by 5.5 inch extruded aluminum pocket. That pocket is an upgrade or upcharge. It gives you a flat front and a removable bottom, which we call the flap. And the other front part is a lot of times referred to as a hanger. Or you can do a site-built pocket application where it is just bracket only. Each one of the two, the extruded aluminum head box and the extruded aluminum pocket, come in standard colors. You can also have them custom powder coated. We use Cardinal powder coat finishes. If you need a card, we will send those out. It is an extra charge for us to custom powder coat, and it does affect lead time. It extends the lead time. Please note that if you do that, the color card that gets sent to you, not available with color numbers starting in E or H. I believe those are some of the hammered finishes, and we don't offer those. So the standard extruded aluminum head box that it comes with integrates with most structures pretty easily. It's easy to access the shade as the front cover over here on this side does come off. It rotates up and it is cantilevered at the top. You can wall or ceiling mount, and when we get into the installation section, it'll make a little more sense. The picture on the left shows it as a ceiling mount. It does have aluminum end caps on the ends, and it does come with heavy-duty aluminum mounting brackets. The 5 by 5.5 inch extruded pocket detail, as you can see, it's a rectangular pocket. It's 5 by 5.5, and that front section of the head box actually is removable, and then the access flap at the bottom is also removable. We always suggest using a safety screw. We'll touch on that when we get into the installation section, but that keeps that bottom access flap in place so it can't be pulled off or bumped or knocked off. So the extruded pocket, there's a bunch of different uses for it. If you've got any place where you can only access the shade from the bottom, gives you that ability to do that. I'm going to go back one slide. You notice that we've got this front cover that has to be rotated on and off. At my house, I wanted to inside mount these inside some of the openings. The problem was with the detail, I couldn't rotate the front cover off, couldn't rotate it enough to get it on and off. You do, and hopefully have a detailing kit. That kit has all the parts and pieces for 28 and 2900, and in that kit is a 5 by 5.5 inch head box cutaway. If you remove the set screw that goes through the side of the end cap, you can take that cover and rotate it on and off, and you can hold it up into an application to see if you can rotate that cover enough. Also, this detail with the extruded pocket allows customers to have a square look instead of a rounded or a five-sided box. So I've had architects that like the square look, and it integrates and seems to match the home a little bit better. Also know, again, shade is going to hang down 3 3/4 inch when retracted. So if you're trying to do something where you need clear opening, you'd add that 3 3/4 with the 5.5, and you'll see on the next slide, detail for a site-built pocket. The pocket over here on the right-hand side does have a 6.5 by 9, and that's to give you that clear opening. So the detailing on that front, on the extruded pocket, you can see the flap and hanger section of it, and that safety screw that we recommend being put in. You can also see that there is a radius required to open and close the standard head box. So just understand that there are different ways to detail the product depending on what your need is. So we also offer a site-built pocket scenario. That means the shade can be concealed up inside of a pocket that's built specifically for it. Typically, we spec those as 6.5 by 9. We do have all of these drawings and all of these detailings on Insolroll.com. If you need to get into the dealer portal to download some of them, you can use your dealer ID to access those. They are all there for you to use. Understand also, if you're working with a site-built pocket and you have columns that you're putting side tracks into or using a U-track, and we'll go over that next, understand that your shade is actually wider than the columns that you're going into. So when you're working with those pockets, it's best to have at least 2 to 2.5, 3 inches beyond where you're actually going to mount the bracket. What that allows you to do is come in at an angle with the shade, go past where your side track is going to mount, and then when you bring the other end up, you can come back with it. If you look at the detailing here, we've got a top pocket view, which is a little harder to look at. But if you look at the right side in that front view, you'll notice that we're using a U-track, and the U-track is the next slide. I'm going to go through those. It'll make a little more sense. But that U-track is designed when you're working with new construction. Allows you to install the U-track ahead of time, come back, and your track sits into it. A couple key things to understand about U-track is your shade is actually a 1/2 inch narrower than what the outside of U-track to outside of U-track measurement is. And when you install or come back to install, or the installers do it, I get asked all the time, where do I mount my brackets? How do I figure out where they go? Well, if you come in with that track and either set it into the U-track and slide it up, or turn it upside down and slide it up, basically what you're going to have is it's going to come up to the very top of the pocket. You mark the back of that with a pencil or a Sharpie, that will tell you exactly where your bracket needs to mount. Hopefully that makes some sense. If it doesn't, we can pull it up in the chat and I can try to explain it better. But if I slide my track up, it's going to give me exactly where my bracket needs to sit. So with the 2900, you can order and pre-order. It is not part of the cost of the regular shade. It's actually an add-on, but we offer what we call a recessed side track in a U-track. So these U-tracks can be ordered ahead of time during construction. And they have a bunch of different purposes that we can get into. So first and foremost, outside of U-track and outside of U-track to outside of U-track is a 1/2 inch wider than what your actual order size will be. And that's because this track, as I'm going to blow it up a little bit, as you see, there's a void on the back of this track. So if you install a U-track and then you go to install your track into it, there's a void, and that void is there so it allows you to have a place to put the screws so it doesn't run into it. U-tracks can be ordered prior, ahead of time, installed. There's the reasoning behind this. Much of the reasoning behind this, as you can see in that picture, there's some masonry columns that have embedded tracks. I have had the most unpleasant time talking to several custom builders where I've installed track ahead of time and then come back and had either painters paint the track and paint the insert, stucco folks have stuccoed over it. I've had masons hit it with a hammer, hit it with rock, and bend the track and actually damage it. All of those to the point where you could not install shade. What does that mean? That means they had to be removed and reinstalled after the fact. Not a great situation to be in. U-track allows them an empty track that hopefully they don't damage. If it got paint in it, big deal. It's not going to hurt it. You can clean it out because it's an open track. Also allows them to build up to it. So you can theoretically use it as a stucco edge, a masonry edge, an edge to come up to. So just understand also that, we'd prefer to have a 1/4 inch reveal around it, but it is there and the ability to come up to it. U-tracks can also be a solution for out of square openings. So if you run into an opening and you're inside mounting a shade and you come to find out that it is out of square, you could order U-tracks, order your shade obviously narrower than you need, and then be able to adjust with inside that U-track and then come in from the sides to affix the side tracks. We do have the U-track information all laid out in the detailing information in the new detailing construction guide. Here's kind of a blowout and drawing as well as the physical U-track to show you how they kind of work. So again, number one, track gets installed, the U-track gets installed prior to finishing off. They come in, finish the masonry, finish whatever they need to do around that. When you come to install, you actually insert the track right into the U-track. So it's a great feature. It makes installation, especially on new construction, much easier to deal with. We're going to get into measuring and detailing. Oasis 2900 should be detail to provide a minimum of a 1/4 inch clearance beyond any obstruction in the front and behind the hem bar. The reason I bring this up, fabric moves, so do hem bars a little bit. So you want to give it clearance as it runs up and down, that it's not going to be bumping into or running into something that would ruin the shade or hang it up. When you're measuring, order size is outside of bracket to outside of bracket, which is also outside of track to outside of track. You're going to hear me say this about 50 times through this webinar, and that is because the outside of the head box should line up with the outside of the track after it's installed. There, we've got some photos of this. If it doesn't, it could become problematic for you. So they should line up right from the get-go. So we suggest measure top, middle, and bottom. I personally usually measure 4 or 5 places, going up and down the shade for width. Understand you'd want to round those down to the nearest 16th. Factory will take 1/8 of an inch deduction for inside mounts for 2900s with the head box. The reason being for that is you got to get it into the spot where you're measuring. So if we give you an 80-inch box that goes into an exact 80-inch opening, it's going to be difficult for you to get it into that opening. We will make no deductions for 2900 with exposed roller bracket system. Understand that the tolerances for 2900 are very tight. Order height, order from the top of the head box or the top of the mounting bracket to the bottom of the side track. Also understand that not all bottom areas are level. My patio, you're going to see a picture of it here after a bit, has a drop to it. So it actually drops from one side to the other because it's pitched to get the water away from the house. If I order it at the least amount of height, I'm going to have a track on one side that comes up short. If I order it at the highest height, I'm going to have a track on one side that I'm going to have to actually cut. So understand how that works and how you want it to be portrayed for your customer. Cutting a track down is not a very difficult thing to do. The bottom plate on it has 2 Phillips head screws. You take those off. You can put the whole thing right into a chop saw, aluminum chop saw, and cut it. Or you can cut it with you can also cut it with a hacksaw. Do your due diligence to make that cut nice and square. Put the cap back on, put the screws back in it, and you're off and running. Again, note that the hem bar hangs 3 3/4 inches below the box, and there should be a little bit of fabric exposed. So when you go to mount the shade, if you want clear opening, remember to get clear opening, you're going to have to add the 5.5 in the 3 3/4 to get that height you need to get it clear opening so you don't have anything protruding.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Real quick note, I got a direct message in the chat asking about ordering different lengths for the side track. So just to clarify, Matt was talking about you can order it to the shorter height or the longer height. You cannot order a shade with 2 different size side tracks.
That is true. Thank you. Kevin and I've talked about this a couple of times. So another thing to keep in mind when measuring at the top, that box is 5 inches deep. And I will tell you from many years of measuring and installing both, very rarely do I find openings that are 5 or 6 inches deep that the measurement at the front is the same as the measurement at the back. So worthwhile to take a measurement at the back where the back of the box is going to be and take a measurement at where the front of the box is going to be. Especially, obviously, with inside mount, you have to. Understand that those 2 can vary, and I've seen those hang people up also. Again, with the track height, we just covered that. So keep that in the back of your head. And then, I would suggest measuring the diagonals. If you're off more than 1/4 of an inch, consider ways that you can square up that window. If that's reduce the overall width size, if that's build out, shimming, if that's ordering U-track and bringing those in to square that up, that may be an option for you. If you run into those, again, customer service, sales, happy to help you out, try to work through it. I probably get 2 or 3 people send me pictures throughout the week. A lot of times I can just doctor a picture, draw on it, give my feedback. Ultimately, you're going to be on site. You're going to have to make the decision, but happy to look at those and help discuss it with you. When you go to order, you're going to be asked extruded aluminum head box, which is the standard. You're going to go for you're going to add the upgrade to do the aluminum pocket, or are you working at a project where they're doing a site build pocket? So just pretty straightforward. Here's the hem bar instructions hem bar obstructions that we were talking about. Keep an eye out for things that are going to could possibly bump into the shade. I have some furniture at my house that is pretty close. It's like a outdoor patio couch thing. If it gets pushed back, it can impede the shade when it's going up or down. So just understand the application and what's around it. Look for anything that might interfere with the lowering or the raising of the shade. Although it is a captured edge, fabric does billow a little bit in and out. So if you've got something close to it, stone or stucco, that the fabric could rub on, understand that you'll wear out fabric much quicker by doing that. Operator side or handling. Front of the box, you would look at the front of the box. Right side is right and left is left. Funny this comes up, but it does. So just understand that when you're ordering, if you're looking at the front of the box, if you want motor right, you're going to order it with motor right, and left is left. The other thing you're going to have to choose is inside mount or outside mount, obviously. Are you using a U-track? If you are, you need to make sure I'd have a conversation with customer service, or we should talk about, again, the deduction for that. Make sure that you're able to mount your tracks plumb, parallel, and in plane. And then you're going to need to decide if they're side mount or if they're face mount. So if you're inside mounting or outside mounting. Since we're working with shades up to 19 feet wide, you're going to run into railroading fabric. Perfectly fine, not a problem. Do understand whatever fabric you're working with, the seam is going to typically be from the bottom up, and it will be whatever your fabric width is minus 4.5. So that is where you're going to have the seam. Also understand that's a fact. That's where the factory seam would be. Also understand that if you have shades that you need a custom seam location, we can do that. So if you had a mullion or railing or something that you wanted the seam to match because you're going to have a seam anyway and you didn't want it maybe in their view, we can do that. There is a cost to it. We can also do custom. We can also do custom seams, or if you've got multiple shades on a project and you're going to have a seam, if you want all of those seams, if you want everything on the project to be seamed so it all matches, that's an option also. So just know that that is available. Kevin, I feel like there was something that you wanted to add last time on seams.
It was just about railroading in general, that even if a fabric doesn't need to be railroaded, it can't be railroaded to match other shades on the same project.
And then the last thing to think, one of the last things I think to always think about is floor slope. So 2900s do have a 1-inch flexible seal strip at the bottom. That seal strip, you can get away with about 3/4 of an inch of variance for floor slope. This is my patio. I do have about 2 inches of floor slope. I do have a railing. The way I decided to take care of this is I ordered a section of U-track, and I used some construction adhesive, adhered it right to the concrete, and my tracks, the bottom rail comes down. It's just between the two tracks on the side, comes down and sits right in that. Because I have a railing there, I was able to do that, and it has worked very well for keeping insects out and sealing that gap. There's lots of different ways to tackle this, and those, we're happy to discuss some of the options to do that. All exterior 2900s are motorized, so you do have two options to motorize the product. There are lots of aspects and things to consider when you're doing motorized product. So one of those is whether you're going to do line voltage or low voltage. If you're doing low voltage, keep in mind that it requires a power supply, and that power supply needs to be installed inside the home. So it needs to be someplace where it's climate controlled. If you're doing line voltage, is there power accessible? Will you need an electrician, or does one need to be involved? At my house, I've got electrical out on my patio. So my stuff for my 2900s, I routed the cabling inside of the side track, came down. When it came out, I've got a plug on the end, and I literally plugged it right into an outside outlet. So you may or may not need an electrician to be involved in that project. So understand where there's power at and how can you access it and get to it. We use for Somfy motors, we use what we call an IQM-ACR, which is Insolroll quiet motor. AC is alternating current. R stands for radio. We use a couple of different Somfy radio motors, depending on how big the shade is. So they're either 6 or 10 Newton meters. We determine that off of the size of the shade. We do have all of the documentation on our website that an electrician would need for wiring. But the general aspects of that are motors draw up to 1.1 amps at startup. Also understand that Insolroll radio motors can be wired in parallel. Unlike non-radio AC tubular motors, you cannot daisy chain them. So in layman's terms, you can plug two shades into a single outlet, not a problem. Never, you say, this is one I've run into also, never cut the motor lead wire less than 18 inches. There's two reasons for that. One is the radio antenna is embedded in it. They actually use the ground wire as the radio antenna. So if you cut it shorter than 18 inches, technically you're cutting off some ability for that shade to receive a radio signal. The other is 18 inches gives you enough room to provide a drip loop. Drip loops, and we'll show you a picture of that on the install section. Drip loops are helpful. What it does is it keeps water from coming down and following that cord directly into the motor head. Definitely obviously recommended. All wiring must conform to the National Electrical Code and local codes. We do have two other motor options that are available for Somfy motors. One is going to be IQM AC, which is a 110 volt quiet bidirectional motor. So it's what I consider a non-intelligent motor, a 4-wire motor. Those need to be hardwired directly to a switch. Don't sell very many of them, but they do come up from time to time, so it is available. And then we also have an IQM 485 AC motor. That's 110 volt power input with a data cable connection. That motor allows bidirectional feedback and can communicate, if hooked up to an automation system, can communicate that way. So last fall, I believe it was, Kevin, we now stock the 8-foot 4-inch length cable for hardwired applications with the universal quick connect. So if you need that and you want that, it would come with the female end on the motor. The male end can be given to an electrician for them to hardwire if you would like. Also, it gives you the option of a J-box junction solution. So you can order those components. An electrician can come in and wire those, and then you can twist lock right onto an exterior application with that. And then you also have just, standard J-box. For those who are not familiar, J-box stands for junction box. Top left, the one on the left is new construction. The one on the right is what they consider old construction, because the new construction had you nail it right onto the wood. But so those two options typically are going to have an outlet in them, like the picture below, with a cover. Literally, if you have a shade, if you get it with a molded plug it right in. If it comes with a pigtail, you can put a plug on it and plug it right into an outlet to do your programming and run the shade. We also offer with the Driven by Lutron product. So that product comes with a Savoia Roller 300 EDU, electronic drive unit, which provides integration with Lutron's Homework QS, Radio Raw 2, and Caseta. Radio Raw 2 and Caseta would both need a RF dongle radio receiver, which is down there in the left-hand corner. Lutron Savoia Roller 300 EDUs are a 35 volt low voltage drive, and they require a power supply. Typically, it's located in a climate controlled area or inside the house. Understand with those that if you're working with a Lutron project and they have some Lutron shades already in house, the power supply is the same that powers those shades if they're powered by a power supply. So that option is available for you, and it is there for you to use. Kevin, I'm going to take a quick break for a second. We got a couple of questions that came up. You get everything answered?
Yeah, I think so. So backing up a little bit about some of the fabric and railroading, we did have a question about whether we can railroad two different fabrics together, and unfortunately we cannot. The fabrics do have to be the same.
That is correct, although you can committee request it. Can't guarantee it, but it's worth a committee request.
Sure. The other question was if the seam of the two fabrics is ever visible. And that seam is definitely visible if the height of the shade is greater than the roll width of the fabric you're using.
Correct. So if you've got a 100-inch shade and you're using, and you have to railroad a 126-inch good fabric, it's going to be railroaded, it's going to be seamed, but the seam would be in the wrap. So in that case, you wouldn't see the seam. And customer service, sales, we can help you out with that if you've got specific questions on it. Onward and upward.
Yep. Other than that, I think we can keep plugging ahead.
No. So we're going to dive into installation, and basically, I'm going to go through all of the installation instructions that come with the shade. I'm going to break it down a little bit for you, and there's some tips and tricks that aren't in those installation guides that may help you. So tools, Kevin and I were kind of joking about this the other day. I don't know that I can list every tool that I've ever used to install an exterior product. The standard stuff, I mean, the standards are going to be screw gun, Phillips head, bit extender, hex head driver, standard and Phillips head screwdrivers, wire strippers, pliers, level, motor test switch if needed, tape measure. The one that does come up is 1/8-inch drill bit, 3/16, 3/8, and 9/64. 9/64, and I believe 7/16 also I can throw in there. We were also discussing, Kevin, that you said if you're going through a big box store, you typically get a shorter bit than if you go through somebody that specializes in tools.
Yeah, typically at a big box store, you will find a small standard size, and then you will find a very, very long bit. If you go to a local fastener store, you'll be able to find kind of a mid-size one that's more useful for these applications.
Yeah, and the reason that comes up is head boxes are like I said, 5 by 5.5. So sometimes, depending on what you're drilling into, it's nice to have a bit that's a little bit longer. So optional tools: laser level, plumb bob, 4-foot level, socket set, hammer, vice grips, chop saw, obviously ladders, dry lubricant. This is just a general. Understand the project you're working on and what you may need. I've had rock chisels. I've had 3-pound mauls. I've used sledgehammers. Depending on what I've had to move or chisel out or change or adapt. Doesn't happen very often, but I have run into, I've got a drill bit down in my garage that is, I believe I've got a 2.5-foot or 3-foot drill bit because I needed to get through a section that was hard to access, but I needed the length to get to it. So just understand the project you're working on, what you might need. Insolroll does not provide fasteners. So please understand your project, what you're working on, and what you may need. We do send I believe it's a 3-inch screw for the side tracks that has the painted head. We do provide the fasteners that are needed to fasten the closures on the head box, but we don't send any fasteners to mount the shade. Those really need to be dictated off of what you're mounting into and how you're mounting. So when you receive an Insolroll Oasis 2900, the traditional head box, the first thing you're going to need to do is install the end plates. The end plates are not attached to the back cover prior to shipment. Really, the reason for that is it helps mitigate shipping damage. Although we do a very good job, I think we do a good job of packing the product, issues can come in if you've already got a end cap put on them. So we send the end cap separate with the screws. The end caps have a tang on them. Align the end plate so that the tangs are facing each other. The tang facing toward the inside of the head box for the right end plate, shown below. And then you're going to have a number 6 by 3/4-inch stainless steel sheet metal screw that puts those on. My suggestion is muscle up and put those on by hand. I will tell you, I had one that I snapped the head off on. It was not the most pleasant thing I had to do to get it back out of there with no head on it. So it's much easier to tighten them down by hand and not over torque and twist them off. So just be aware of that. Once you have that end plate on, the inside of the box actually has ceiling mount bracket ridges and surface mount bracket ridges. The reason those are there and designed the way they are is so that when you put your bracket, wall mount or ceiling mount, it centers it up for you. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to try to figure out where to put it. It does it for you. The bracket sits perfectly between those ridges. So if you're doing a wall mount, put that bracket right into those bracket ridges. You're going to take a pencil or a pen or marker or whatever you're using, and you're going to mark the holes in that. Once they're marked, you're going to want to pre-drill those with a 3/16-inch drill bit. I will tell you, it's much easier to do all the prep work in front of you on the ground than it is to try to do this up above your head with a large head box. So everybody's different, but that's how I would suggest doing it. Make the determination if you're doing wall mount or ceiling mount, do all your prep work where it's easy to get to and it's easy to access. Ceiling mount's the same exact process. You're going to align that motor bracket right between those ridges. Mark your bracket. Again, pre-drill those with a 3/16 drill bit. We suggest doing intermediate supports on your head box. Again, decide if you're doing wall mount or ceiling mount. And for up to 8 foot, just a center support is great because it's going to be held at the ends by the brackets at some point. But if you're working with larger boxes, 8 to 14 or wider than 14 foot, we suggest using intermediate support points to hold that box up while you're working. Makes life a lot easier. Once you've determined where those are going to go, you're going to want to mark and drill a hole through either the top, back, or the back cover, or the end plate for the future routing of the motor wire. So depending on where you're routing that wire, you may need to drill a hole. It's typically a 7/16-inch drill bit. But that depends on the wire and what you're doing and wire diameter. We do provide a rubber grommet to go into that hole, and that helps so that you're not rubbing the insulation off of the wire. So keep that in mind as you're determining how you're going to mount and where you're going to mount and where you're going to run your wiring. So once you've got all your holes drilled and pre-drilled and ready to go, you're going to mark the top of the back cover is mounted at the order height. So I would mark where your order height is, bring your box up to it. Hopefully you pre-drilled for that intermediate support. You're going to put the screw in, and then you're going to want to dry fit the side track to make sure that the height is correct for you. Things move hard. Sometimes those boxes are big. It's worthwhile to double check to make sure that rail is going to fit where you want it, and adjust if needed. So once that's done, you're going to secure the back cover using those intermediate mounting points. Screw the box up there. Make sure that it's level, obviously. And then once you've got it up there and it's level, you're going to want to make sure that you don't over tighten those screws and damage the back cover. So we suggest using a number 8 by 1.5 inch pan head. The reason we talk about pan head screws a lot of times is construction screws, drywall screws, those sometimes have a tendency to either snap the head off of them, or if your hole that you drilled maybe widened out a little bit, sometimes you can suck them right through the aluminum. So it's recommended. Pan head screw doesn't seem to do that. Sometimes I'll put a washer behind mine just for extra support for myself. Once you've got that box level, then you can put up your brackets. So screw the brackets to the wall or the ceiling, the mounting surface, through the back cover. We suggest a number 10 by 1.5 inch or longer panhead screw, but understand that you need to know what substrate you're drilling into. I personally like a lag bolt with a washer on it. That's my preferred, depending on what I'm mounting into. But if we don't know if you're going into concrete, if you're going in steel, if you're going into just wood. So understand what you're mounting into, and that it needs to carry some weight, and you need to use the proper fasteners for that. Once you've got both those sides done and the brackets are up, you're going to want to remove the motor retainer clip. That clip, if you don't remove it, you're going to be hard pressed to get your motor in that bracket. So make sure you take that's also known as a C clip, but make sure you take that clip off. If you're new to installing exterior product or motorized product, majority of motorized product out there has a spring-loaded idler. That idler, as you can see on the top pictures, is spring-loaded, and when it's out, sticks out a fairly good distance. It is designed to be pushed against, and it is spring-loaded. So the way that it operates normally is you would insert that idler pin into the idler bracket, and then you're going to push against it to compress it. That should allow you enough room to get the motor head into the motor bracket. That motor head on a Somfy motor is a star head. And what that allows you to do is rotate that head to where you want it so that you can have the cord that comes out in whatever position you need it to be in. So a couple of things to know. Somfy motor heads have a yellow orangey cap over them. That cap covers a plug. So if you were to take that cap off, behind it are two Phillips head screws. If you take a screwdriver and remove those, you can actually take the plug out of the motor in most cases without any problem. Why is this important? Well, at my house, I had 24-foot cords. I had cords that I wanted to strap inside of the box from one shade to the next. And so I removed all of those plugs out of the motors, ran all my cords ahead of time, so I didn't have to work around the shade, and then left enough room that when I went to install the shade, I could bring the idler end up. I had a helper, before I compressed the idler end, I brought the shade up close enough, reinserted the plug into the motor head, put those two Phillips head screws back in, compressed the idler end over, and then inserted it into the motor bracket. So it also allows you to, because it's oriented in such a way, you can obviously move that motor head forward or back, depending on where you need your cord to come out. So once that's done, reattach that retainer clip, that motor clip. Once it's attached, the shade can't come off. That motor clip is designed to hold the motor head, so it cannot come back off that bracket. When all that is done, you can run your power cord, if you hadn't done it already, through the previous drilled hole. Orient the cord so that it doesn't interfere with the shade operation, and ensure you have an adequate direct loop, so that no condensation can follow the cord down into the motor head. At this point, you can do a couple of things. You can plug the shade in if you've got a plug on it. If you don't have a plug, you can put the plug on and then plug the shade in. If you're hardwiring it and you don't have an electrician that's waiting around for you, which I hope you don't, you can get a test switch from us. We have those for order. You want to keep that test switch in the off or the center position. Don't want to plug it in until all your wires have been connected. Once all wires have been connected, you can plug it in, turn on the switch, and then you can refer to the programming instructions for AC or ACR motors. After programming, I usually set an intermediate upper stop, and then I typically go almost all the way to the bottom and set my bottom limit before I ever do anything with tracks. And there's a reason for this, and we're going to get to it here in just a minute. After that is done, I typically bring the shade down about 12 to 18 inches from the top. And there's a reason for that, and we're going to get into it with tracks. I'm going to touch on this again. The tracks are designed to be aligned with the head box or the bracket. Failure to follow this step will almost always result in improper operation. You're going to have problems if you don't do that. So as you can see, these three pictures at the bottom, the one on the left, the side track's aligned with the bracket. The other two, it's perfectly aligned with the head box. That's the way the product is designed. So as you go to install your tracks, you're going to mount the side tracks with the appropriate opening and height. You're going to have them line up with the outside of the head box. And there's a couple of tricks. So the hem bar and the hem bar end caps attached to the shade fabric. So the trick is, it is much easier if you've got that shade down 12 to 18 inches to slide the track onto the zipper rather than put your track up and try to get it into the zipper. So if you slide it up onto the zipper, and because the shade is down 12 to 18 inches, you can move the hem bar out a little bit, slide it up on to capture the zipper will be captured in the side track, and then repeat that step on the other side. So from there, you're going to line up the outside of the track to match with the outside of the bracket or the head box. Once it's lined up, I typically put in my first screw, and I put it in fairly loosely, making sure that my head box and my track are lined up and it's up against it. And I don't tighten that screw down, and there's a reason for that. I do that on both sides. Once that's attached on both sides, I run the shade down because the zipper is in the track on both sides, which means the track has to follow where that zipper goes. It will square up the shade for you. You don't have to do all this fancy, try to figure out how to get it all squared up. As long as your head box is mounted square and plumb, that means your shade is mounted square or level. That means when it comes down, it's going to square up those tracks for you. Pretty simple way to install. As you notice, I'm going to blow this picture up. You've got a little void here. And Kevin, I remember you can see this on your screen, correct? My pointer?
Correct, yep.
Okay, so you've got a small void here, and then you've got this zipper insert that holds this zipper. That piece of nylon or plastic sits right inside here. Shouldn't push against it hard. It should sit in there and have a little bit of room to move. As it comes down, it should ride right in that opening and square everything up for you. Once it gets to the bottom, you're going to want to put in your bottom screw. I will tell you, for those of you who install, run your shade up a little higher than where you're going to put the screw in. I have seen folks that have hopped off the screw and ran it right through the fabric. I've also seen them hop off the screw and gouge the bottom rail, or actually I've seen it go through the bottom hem or the bottom seal also. So always raise your shade up a little bit higher and then put that screw in. I always leave them loose and run the shade up and down. So loosely secure all the side tracks at the appropriate width and height using a number 8 or number 10 screw. As long as the shade is level at the top, it's going to square everything up. From there, you can go back and tighten screws and fasteners as you go. So again, do not drill next to the shade material. That's can be a big no-no, and that's not a warranty issue if you run a drill through the fabric. So once all that is up and done and finished, then you can actually go back and set your upper and lower limits where they need to be. I will tell you, I have 4 2900s, 2 about 12 footers and 2 16 footers. Once the brackets, box, and all of that was up, it took me about 30 to 35 minutes probably with a helper to finish all the tracks. So doing it that way can take a lot, can cut down your install time drastically. For the upper limit, you again want to be 3 3/4 inches down from the head box. If you don't have a head box and you're doing open roll, you want it down from the top of the side track. The reason being is it keeps the fabric retained at the top. I then would go back and set your bottom limit. You can refer to the radio programming and limit setting switch if you need to, that you can download. Customer service, if you get hung up on programming, customer service is happy to help you and walk you through. They're very good at that. I would go back then and remeasure tracks top, middle, and bottom, check to make sure that the tracks are level, plumb, and make sure that they're same width as your order size. Set your upper and down limits as required, and then you're basically ready to go. So the final adjustments, run the shade up and down multiple times, make sure that nothing's telescoping, everything's level, everything's working properly. Then you're going to install your front cover. So front cover's pretty straightforward. It's got kind of a tongue and groove. It has a kind of a cantilever effect, so it rotates in. That helps. It shouldn't just pop off or fall off while you're working with it. When you put that front cover on, it should stay engaged as you push it closed. If you've got access to the end, you can put in the number 6 by 3/4 inch screw that's supplied, and you're done. The front cover's done and finished. If you don't have access to that screw, so if you're outside mounting and you can't get to it, or you're inside mounting and you can't get to it, you can drill a hole in the front cover through the end plate in tang with an 1/8 inch drill bit, and then secure it with a 3/8 inch painted sheet metal screw that's supplied. So also understand that wider shades may require more than 2 installers to attach the front cover. Some of that has to do with just the sheer size. It also has to do with whatever substrate you're mounting that box to originally. So if you have a box that's 16, 18 feet or bigger, if that substrate is not flat and square and you tweak that box a little bit, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to put that front cover on. One of my 16 footers at my house took 3 of us to put it on. Somebody in the middle and somebody on each end, because it's just too wide for everybody to reach. So just understand that you may need an extra help on some of these final steps. Front cover installation for the pocket cover box or the pocket box. So it's going to be the same aspect. You may have to do this prior to installing the box because if it's going up into a recess, you're not going to have access to that end plate. So understand that. There is also, as you can see, a tang here that allows you to screw through it if you need to. Once that's done, you're going to put that optional flap on at the bottom. So if you do use the flap, which most people do, you're going to want to make sure that you put that safety screw in there. So at the end of the flap, you come in 1/4 inch from the back, use an 1/8 of an inch drill bit, pre-drill the hole, and mark the locations. Obviously, you're not going to do it in black Sharpie and have that seen by the customer. You get the idea. That's the correct spot to put those. The final step is insert the plug buttons into the side track for face mount applications, and then your install should be complete. Troubleshooting. These are some things that we've seen come up, we've addressed. We have questions about, they don't come up a lot, but they do come up. So first is shade gets stuck on one side when it's rolling down, and what happens afterwards. So there's a couple of things that can cause it. So measure the side track width from outside to outside of outside of track to outside of track. Make sure it's the same as the order width, or the same size as the box. The dimensions should be equal for the outside of the head box. If it's not, you may have to adjust tracks. So not sure how that happened, but maybe it got tightened down during installation and things got out of whack. So outside, again, like I said, I've said this 100 times, outside of track to outside of track width should equal outside of box width. If the width dimension is more than an 1/8 of an inch difference in order size, track placement needs to be adjusted by moving them in or out to match the order size. If side tracks are built into the column with a U-track, you can adjust the position of the U-track, adjust the position in the U-track to match the order width. So we do run into this where I've seen installers and had folks that will put the tracks into the U-trap, tighten it down as tight as they can, install the shade, and it doesn't operate. And that's because the order width was done at the narrowest width, and when it's installed, they suck it all the way out as wide as it would go, and then you end up with the track that gets bound up on one side or both sides. Again, leaving those loose as you install and understanding that the shade will self-center everything, that a lot of times fixes the problem. I had one earlier this year where that exact same thing happened. When they loosened up all the screws, everything worked properly. And then they went back and shimmed behind it. Measure the diagonal dimensions. These measurements should be within a quarter inch of each other, or the side tracks may need to be readjusted or reinstalled to square it up. Again, if you've got an out of square opening to begin with, installing a shade obviously is not going to square it up. So you may have to use potentially a U-track or some other means to get that squared up to install properly. Remove the front cover and check the zipper for damage on both sides. Pull the shade up and out of the track. Check that the leading edge of the zipper near the hem bar. If there's damage, you can carefully cut out a small section of that zipper that causes the problem. We suggest do not remove more than 1 linear inch of zipper. So if you got a damaged zipper, you can remove that damaged section out of there. Visually check both sides of the side track. Look for dirt or other obstacles, obstructions that may have gotten into that black side track or insert. Remove obstructions by hand. You can spray water in it or compressed air. We have seen insects that get in there, mud daubers, what have you, that can happen. And, oddly enough, it can stop or hinder the shade from operating properly. So just understand that you might want to check the tracks too. It is normal for a shade to get caught if a customer rolls it down in high winds, which creates wind load on the fabric, preventing the shade from dropping. I've done this at my house. I've got a northern shade that is usually the one that gets the most wind. And if it's blowing 15 plus miles an hour and I try to put the shade down, it will get stopped because the amount of force pushing on that shade causes it to stop coming down. There's not enough weight to pull it down because the wind's pushing against it. It's also normal for some fabrics to stiffen or shrink slightly in freezing temperatures. So if your tolerances are tight and you get a big cold snap overnight, that fabric may tighten up and the shade may not work exactly the way it did the day before. So really, there shouldn't be a whole lot of adjustment. Typically, that's something we don't see very often with the cold. We do see it with the wind come up periodically. They should work fine after the weather conditions improve. So I have had customers call and say, hey, the wind's blowing pretty good and the shade won't come down. It's because you've got too much tension and push on that shade. So setting the right expectations from the get-go can really help to avoid some of those unnecessary repair calls. So fabric comes out of the side track just from the get-go. So in that case, that side track was loosened up on purpose to show, but the upper limit was set too high from the get-go. So if your upper limit is set too high, there's a very good chance that you're going to run the zipper right out of the zip track. If you also notice on that zip track, there is a small section of that track that comes up above the track itself. And that, again, is to try to help make sure it funnels in and it stays inside that track. That's why that limit should be 3 3/3 down, set 3 3/4 down, because keeps that fabric retained in that track. It doesn't let it come up and out. There are a variety of outdoor elements that can cause a shade to roll up higher. Wind, insects, fabric rolling over itself. Roll down the shade, clean out any debris that may have gotten caught. If fabric is creased, let it hang in the hot sun for a while. Creases typically come right out when it's setting in the sun. I wouldn't perform any of these procedures under windy conditions. I have seen all sorts of stuff rolled up in exterior product. When I lived in Arizona, I've seen pack rats that have gotten up inside shade housings and packed a bunch of garbage up in there, and that hinders the way shade operates. I've seen birds that have gotten up there and nested because people didn't use them for a long time. I've seen bees, wasps, mud daubers get up inside and make nests. I've also seen all sorts of things get rolled up in shades. Lizards, geckos, moths, insects. So there are things that can hamper or change the way that shade is supposed to operate normally. Shades may have gotten hung up on one side when rolling down, causing the shade to unroll inside the head box. So if that happens, typically rolling down the shade or pulling the hem bar down as you go, roll the shade up and down a few times carefully to make sure that nothing's caught in it. And then ask the customer to remove the obstructions like patio furniture or casement windows may have caused the problem. I've had that a couple of times at my house. I did the day before yesterday. One of the chairs got pushed back into where the shade went down. Didn't notice it when I putting the shade down. That shade stopped because it was hung up by patio furniture. Stopped the shade, moved the patio furniture, hung onto the bottom bar, let the shade down. It came down. All was fine. I have had it where it's rolled off too far. And then when I went to roll it back up, and the fabric had creased to the inside. So really it was roll the shade down, roll it past its limit to get it past the crease, and then roll it back up. Pretty easy thing to take care of. Typically, just moving the obstruction and letting the shade down takes care of the problem. We do hear of third-party trades, window ushers, painters, may have pushed the shade up out of the way because they're working up around it. And when they did that, they actually pushed the shade up out of the zip trap. It does happen. And a lot of times when you put the shade down, if it's not windy and there's no breeze going on, it'll look like it's in the track. And then as soon as you get a breeze, it miraculously isn't in the track. We hear that quite often, that, hey, it's just the zipper's not holding the track, or the track's not holding the zipper. Most cases, that's not true. It's fed out from the beginning, and you didn't notice it because the track is black. The zipper, most of the zipper is black, and you just don't notice it. So ensure that the top is set again at that 3 3/4. Fabric zipper comes out of track. The zipper can come out of the track as a result of either the top limit not being set or being set too high, or the track not being installed properly. That track is not installed properly. It should be outside of track, is outside of box. This one's about 1/4 inch off. So that definitely can cause that to happen. Zipper damage. If the zipper teeth are damaged, remove the front cover, carefully observe both sides of the zipper as it's lowered into the side track. While it lowers, push on the shade gently at the location of the zipper damage to ensure that it's not causing problems. If that leading edge of the zipper is damaged, you can trim off 1/8 or 1/4 inch. I will tell you, if the zipper's got some damage to it, or is, as I call it, goobered, or has a teeth missing, not teeth missing, but teeth that are mangled for whatever reason, that can cause it to feed itself out of the track. Doesn't mean the shade's ruined, just means that you've got something that doesn't zip up properly or doesn't come down properly. We all had coats and jackets that have a tooth that's screwed up or goobered on clothing, and it hampers the way it opts for it to operate properly. So just look for those kind of things. We have seen product that, for whatever reason, the shy zip insert gets damaged at the top. That insert should extend above the side track and have a funnel that's not notched into it. Remove any obstructions. Could be something got in there for whatever reason. Observe the zipper going into the track and see if it's pulling hard to one side or the other. If it is, typically that can be caused by a shade that's not level or plumb. It can also be caused by the fabric. So if the fabric's not centered on the roller tube, adjust as needed. So I've seen shades that have been installed slightly off plumb, and over time they telescope and push and push and push, and then you get a shade that's pushing on one side. I had a dealer not too long ago that took over a project from somebody else, and they were having all kinds of problems with the shade not coming down properly. And come to find out, the installer, whoever installed it originally, installed the brackets improperly. So it just created a whole bunch of other problems going forward. Look for damaged debris being stuck in the side track. If the shades were installed in new construction, you may find dirt, masonry, mud, paint. Remove those obstructions, hose down the track, clean it out the best you can. And the infamous motor doesn't work problem. So there's a couple of multiple things that you can look at. If operated by remote or wireless switch, replace the battery. Batteries don't last forever, and they don't last forever in transmitters and remote wall switches. So if the lights don't light up, pretty good chance that the battery's dead. That does, in my opinion, that does not need to be a service call. I've got a handheld remote in my hand. There's a little Phillips head screw. You remove it. Go get the battery that comes in it, replace the battery, and away you go. Check GFI outlets and ensure that the motor has power. If you don't have power, it's not going to run. It doesn't work. So reset the ground fault interrupter. If it's been tripped, ask the customer to check it prior to the service call. They also, at my house, I've got an outlet in the front of the house that is tied to a GFI in the basement. So that GFI may be somewhere besides where you think it is, and doesn't take much to trip a GFI. So it's a very simple thing to check. And worst case scenario, they can go out there with a lamp, plug it in. If the lamp doesn't work, there's no power to that outlet. So it's one of those things that's fairly simple to diagnose and figure out. If you're using a Lutron EDU, they have blink codes on the motors. We do have you can download the Lutron shade blink code document from our dealer website, and you can diagnose what's going on with the motor that way. So that's another option. Motors may not operate in freezing temperatures. We talked about that earlier. Wait until it warms up and try operating again. I had a dealer in some of the northern territory this December, late December, that called and said they had a shade that was on a primary window that had a Lutron EDU, and it was negative, 8 where they were, and the shade wouldn't operate. Well, it was too cold. We did have a front that moved through here last year. I think we hit, what was it, Kevin, negative 14? Do you remember that? The polar vortex?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. It was cold.
Yeah, I went out and tried to run my shades just to see. They did go. They weren't happy, but they did go. So just understand that freezing temperatures can cause issues. And then, like I said, motors may have overheated due to high exterior temperatures or excessive use of large, heavy shades. I have heard of service calls where the customer calls upset that the shade just stopped part of the way down. Usually, from my next question is, do you have somebody that's been operating that shade multiple times in the last few minutes? If the answer is yes, then it's a very simple, must have hit your thermal override. Give it 30 minutes to an hour, and if it still doesn't run, then we'll talk about a service call. But more than likely, it's hit a thermal override. It's overheated. Give it a little bit of time. If you're in Arizona or Death Valley and it's 100 plus degrees out, understand that the time it's going to take for that shade to cool down is going to be longer. If you're in North Dakota, maybe, or you're up in the mountains, maybe a lot less time. So just understand where your customer is and what they're dealing with.